sorry, a walled town.
We don't have to go there.
And
We need to go
the
here.
avenue that we are going across right now used to be water. And where I am standing right now, there was the city wall. And when you will be on the other side of the street, on the sidewalk, you will be at the place where there was the city wall before it was destroyed in the second half of the 17th century. And if you look on your right-hand side, you can see the port of some fishing boats. They are still fishing boats, but not many, as you can see. And they are between two seasons right now. They are getting prepared to their big season. The winter season is their big season. They go to fish sea scallop shells. There's a lot of sea scallop shells in this part of the English Channel that we named the same bay. But if you look on the other side of the boat, you can see the trees, and maybe it's not easy to see from here, but if you look somewhere in front of us, a little bit on the left, there's the top of a crane. Can you see the top of the white crane over there? It's the dock on the Seine River. So here you have the leisure harbour and fishing harbour. But on the other side, on the Seine River, you can have medium cruise ships or small cruise ships that are cruising at sea, that stop over there, or cargoes. So there's harbour activity. If I take you this way, but be very careful because there's a hole in the middle of the streets, of the cobblestones. As I told you, there was towers of defense every so often along this wall. And now we are inside what was the walled city. It is still named the enclosure in French, l'enclos, even though it is not enclosed anymore. The buildings on our left and on our right are some of the oldest buildings from the 17th century on the right-hand side, from the 16th century on the left-hand side. They were using the local materials in the past for building, and it was lots of limestone. But also we have a lot of clay on the street, so lots of bricks. Lots of wood from constructing the buildings, and also flints. Cobblestones under our feet. It's not local material, and it came rather recently with Napoleon I, who decided that all of the roads in France, streets in France, had to be clean. So if you, by stopping here, you can see the square behind you. And instead of this square, there was a church. Inside the enclosure, there were two churches. The enclosure was like a flat medieval castle. And there were soldiers living in the enclosure, but also a few people who lived with them because they needed people to cook for them or to repair their clothes, or so there was like a city in the city with two outskirts that were probably older than the walled city, southern and western, and two churches inside the enclosure, one church in the section further south and another church in the section further west. How do you say that? More recently, in the beginning of the 19th century, they decided to get rid of this church Notre, because it had not been maintained for a long time. It was in very bad shape, and they had other churches, so they didn't need this one. And so it was removed, and nothing was built instead of, and they gained this nice square around which it's pleasant to sit down and enjoy life in this part of the city. If you look behind you, you can see this big building and the buildings that are to the right of it. You can see they are built in limestone. They are big pieces of stone. It's not especially nice architecture. And this one has been beheaded and covered by another construction in bricks, more recently. So there were three large stone buildings side by side. The two that are to the right-hand side are the oldest ones. They date from 1670. And they were built under the orders of Pollard, who was the Minister of Finances of France under Louis XIV. And he built here a big stockpiling place, or 2 buildings for stockpiling salt. Of course, there was no refrigerators in the past, and the only way to preserve food was to salt it. And remember, this is a harbour, so there were ships who were leaving for several months, and they had to bring with them a lot of reserves of food with a lot of salt to preserve them. But also, maybe you know that there was a tax on salt that in French was named like gabelle. It was the equivalent of the income tax that we have to pay now. Everybody needed salt, the poor and the rich. And as everybody needed salt, the best way to make sure that everybody, the poor and the rich, were paying the tax was to put a tax on salt. When I say the poor and the rich, I don't mean the nobles, because the nobles didn't have to pay taxes. Neither the Catholic Church. So it was for the non-nobles and non-religious people. That's also why, I forgot to tell you, according to the different regions of France, the gabelle, the tax, was bigger or smaller. Poor regions had a smaller tax. Very poor regions had no tax at all on salt. But the rich regions, like Normandy, had a big tax. So it was important to have big reserves of salt in Normandy, and that's why they built here these 2 large buildings, because it was useful as it was a harbour, plus because of they wanted to make more money from this tax. So they built 2 buildings, the 2 buildings to the right. Later, a 3rd one was built, but it was destroyed partly by a fire, and after the fire, they transformed it into some type of a large nowadays it's a hotel, but when it was transformed, it was not a hotel. Now it's a luxury hotel. And then I take you a little further. So these salt storage and nowadays the next thing you know, my phone is large rooms, very long, and without any columns in the middle, so large open spaces, and they are they are put at disposal for free by the city of Honfleur for concerts or for associations to organize an exhibition, and private people can rent them for a wedding party or big family events. And then if you look at these stones, you can tell that some of them are really old. And many of these stones, most of them, come from the ex-wall of defense. You remember the wall of defense was dismantled they started dismantling the wall of defense before these buildings were built. And so they were taking the stones of the wall of defense to build these buildings. I put you to a narrow street now, and this is the street of the small butcheries. Small butcheries means the places, the shops where the meat was sold out. Big butcheries were the places where the animals were cut in pieces, and pieces of meat were made. In Middle Ages, until recently, all of the people who were making the same job were living in the same street, and prices were not free. In the past, there was a corporation of butchers, a corporation of bakers who was fixing the prices, and all of them had to pay a tax to the corporation in case there was a problem to one of the butchers or bakers. The corporation, and they were killed, for example, the corporation would have taken care of their wives and children. To see, it was quite well organized. It's one of the only narrow streets left over from the old Honfleur. So you have to imagine in the enclosure only narrow streets like this with small passages between houses. And here you can see the alternance of materials: brick, flint, half timbered, and a lot of different materials used side by side with different colors and different textures. then behind you, you can see the entrance of the Cour de Roncheville. And
It's your telephone
you can
on.
see a part of
You should
the
put
manor
it
of
on.
Roncheville.
So if we lose each other, I can get you.
Lord of Honfleur was the owner, the governor of Honfleur in the 15th century when the harbour was being fortified had been fortified. There was a troop of soldiers who was here, and the Lord of Honfleur was their commander. And so he built this that was transformed in the 16th and 17th century. In the 17th century, it became the house of a ship owner. So, completely different groups. And let's keep going. After the street of the small butcheries, we arrive in the street of the prison. Of course, in a harbor where seamen had been at sea for many months were coming. They were happy to drink and under alcohol. They were not always charming men. You see what I mean? So it was necessary to have a prison in a harbor. The prison is behind me. Of course, it's not being used as a prison now. And it was not the prison where these men would be put in jail for a long time. It was the prison where they were put in jail, waiting for their trial and transfer in another prison. On the right side of the prison, you can see a big building that dates from the 17th century. Have you visited Rouen yesterday? So you have seen Hafton buildings. You know about how traditional they are in the eastern part of Normandy. The western part of Normandy doesn't have that, because the western part that you will discover tomorrow by visiting the Villages is a stone region, no wood over there. And so you can see one more time the same thing that you have seen in Rouen yesterday, with always a few ranks of stone or bricks to insulate the wooden frame from the humidity of the ground and the wooden structure. And it's the museum of like local history museum. On your right-hand side, it is the southern side of the church Ste Catherine. That is still existing, the building, but it's not a church anymore. It's a museum. It's from the 15th century. And now we arrive in front of the Vieux Bassin. That is really the most famous picture of all of the guidebooks about Honfleur show this. It's the picture to take when you come to Honfleur. And we're lucky because it is sunny right now. So when Honfleur was a walled city, this was a piece of water inside the enclosure. Ships could come in through the entrance of the harbor that you can see behind me over there. But then it was not as wide as what it is now. If you look behind me, you can see this construction covered by tiles over there, the clear stone construction covered by tiles of different colors. Can you see it? It's the oldest construction in Honfleur. The oldest part of it is from the 15th century, and it was extended in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. But if you look, there's a flag on top of it. Can you see? A white flag. And look under the flagpole. There is a wall, or there used to be a wall that has been removed. Can you see the beginning of a wall that was destroyed? You remember the city wall that I told you about? So the city wall was this high and this thick. You will see it better as we're going to walk beside it later. And then it was going like this all around this part of the city and coming back this way. You see where the cars are driving over there?
Maybe you have a better understanding of what
wall. And then, look again at this old building. You see where the big tree hiding a part of the building is? If you look on the right of the tree, you can see another remain of a wall. That was the other side of the enclosure of the wall. And you can see that it corresponds to the water because of this piece of water was widened. Okay, so there it was narrower in the past. There was another dock, the wall, and moat, so a ditch full of water on the other side of the wall. And then very quickly after, an embankment, and it's like another town, Ste Catherine, another section of Honfleur, which was the quarter where lived the ship owners. But then it was decided to remove the wall in the 17th century. And they had this thin but long stretch of land left over. And everything had been built inside the enclosure and outside the enclosure. And the population was increasing at this time. And the price of land increased a lot because there was so few left over for building. The owner of this long but thin stretch of land was the Duchess Marie-Caroline de Montpensier. She was the cousin of Louis XIV. And her father was the only, sibling of Louis XIV. So she inherited, and he had only one child, Marie-Caroline de Montpensier. She inherited everything from her father. She was the wealthiest person in France. But she was not wealthy enough. She thought that if she was selling the whole piece of land to one person, she was going to make a lot of money. But not as much as by dividing it in small pieces of land. So that's what they did. It was not her, actually. It was the man who administered her property. And so he divided the land in plenty of small pieces of land. The value of these pieces of land came up very quickly. Everybody wanted to buy a piece. Some people had money enough to buy one piece. And look at these houses, how narrow some of them are. And they are built in height. And some were wealthy enough to build two pieces or three pieces and build something wider.
Looks like they may have been lower initially and they've been built on top of?
They were not lower initially at all. They were built like this. They were all built at the same time, growing up as mushrooms, and it looks as if you remove one, they are all going to fall down, which we're not going to try. You never know. And on the other side, so it's not the same owner that was living on this side than on the other side. So it gives you a good idea of how small these pieces of land were. And so that's what makes the special look of the old dock with this facade of houses, different heights, different width. And all of the houses that the facade is covered by slate are half timbered. It means that under the slate, it's half timbered. It's to protect the wooden frame from the salted air. And then you can see laser boats. So of course for the painters, when they came, a day like today would have been a perfect example. Imagine a painter interested in light, in colors. And sometimes it's like now, beautiful, sunny, and then you have the reflection of the houses at the surface of water, the reflection of the colors of the boats at the surface of water, and rather bright colors. And then maybe in earlier this morning, it was completely different. When it was gray, cloudy, you would have this tormented skies with beautiful clouds and gray colors, so different colors. And that's why also Monet painted with different canvases. Most of the time he had 4 canvases of the same scene because it was different colors early in the morning, at noon, in the evening, or then when it was raining, when it was sunny, when it was foggy, in the winter, in the summer, and all different colors at different times. Because of these traditional artists, remember Boudin was born in Honfleur and he painted a lot in Honfleur, Jonkin as well, and Monet later, and several other artists. There's still lots of art galleries in Honfleur. And look, there's somebody who makes a sketch here. A lot of art galleries everywhere in Honfleur, but most of these art galleries don't sell local artists. Some do, but most of them sell artists that are internationally known. Honfleur is a little bit like in Paris, the place to be for selling art. So it became a fancy resort now, and it's only a 1.5 hour long drive from Paris. And so today it's not so busy. We're lucky because certain weekends it can be packed.
We would like to thank our guide, Karine Pollard. Gary's Tours is grateful to her for leading us through this tour as well as several others. Let me tell you something about the town of Honfleur. It's a city in the department of Calvados in northern France's Normandy region. It's a estuary where the Seine meets the English Channel. The Verdun Basin Old Harbour is lined with 16th and 18th century townhouses and has been subject of artists including Claude Monet and native son Eugene Boudin. Nearby is the 15th century Catherine Church, a bolted timber structure erected by shipbuilders. We would like to thank Google for supplying with this information on the information about Honfleur. And once again, try to subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video, and look for other videos in our channel of Tours of France. Thank you.